with us on DD India. You're watching yet another edition of DD Dialogue, second in series on decoding global media Indian perspective. And on this show, we're going to talk exclusively to Mr. Mohinder Gulati, joining us all the way from Melbourne, former COO, Sustainable Development for All, which is one of the multilateral agencies launched by United Nations. And why we are going to talk to him, basically because Mohinder Gulati, Mr. Gulati, had recently written an open letter to the so-called international climate activist Greta Thunberg, whose Twitter toolkit on farm protests in India became an international talking point. And Mr. Gulati has not only written an open letter, but he has actually given a blow-by-blow rebuttal to Greta Thunberg and many like her, who without having an iota of information about the ground situation in India, tried to wade into India's domestic issues. Mr. Gulati, thank you so much for talking to us on DD Dialogue. And before I throw that first question to you, I think I should tell our DD India viewers that Mr. Gulati has laid down 4 specific key issues for Ms. Thunberg to consider before actually, or many like her, before actually making an opinion about India. And particularly here in question are these farm laws that were recently, in fact, raked by certain international figures, basically to snowball into that into a bigger issue. Mr. Gulati, thank you very much. My first question to you, thank you for talking to us on DD India. My first question to you, what made you write to Greta Thunberg, and have you heard from her on that letter, which actually I think is till now so far the only comprehensive point-by-point rebuttal on the matters that concern farm laws in India?
Thank you very much for having me, and it's wonderful to talk to you about this issue. There were 2 reasons why I wrote this open letter to Greta Thunberg. One reason relates to her activism on climate change, and I'm a great admirer of her. And the second reason relates to the farmers' agitation currently ongoing in India. As I had mentioned in one of my previous interviews to another channel, that I was the first Chief Operating Officer of the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All, where I worked from late 2013 till December 2015. Our organization was vested with the responsibility for building global consensus on 2 things. One, for the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which relates to energy, and for the for the climate agreement, which was ultimately signed in 2015 in Paris. An agreement was achieved on the targets, but the most difficult task is still ahead of us. That is on achieving both the SDGs and also the reduction in carbon emission. At SE4All, we worked very hard to engage the youth, since we were convinced that tapping into the dynamism, into the commitment and the moral compass of youth was very important to keep leaders in the government, in the business and in the society focused on the objectives and holding them accountable.
This is not about Greta Thunberg. This is about the toolkit on Twitter that exposed certain vested interests in certain sections of Western media and the so-called global activists. I'm going to go back to that letter, the open letter. The first 2 issues that you've comprehensively talked about, burning crop residue, and you also tried to focus the attention towards the food wastage, and you contend that the wastage of food itself emits a lot of CO2, and you know, the points that you raised in that open letter and their correlation with the farm protests, if you could just slightly elaborate on that.
Okay. What I had seen was that there was a lot of debate on the farm laws in the media, in the Indian media and elsewhere. And most of the issues that they were debating were about the lack of consultation, or about the non-democratic process of enactment of laws, or the fears and apprehensions about the exploitative private sector, etc., etc. But I saw that there were some very substantive issues which were not being brought to the table for discussion. And I highlighted only four, there are many more. But those four issues were: one issue is on the air pollution caused by the crop residue burning. And I thought, Greta, being a climate activist, this is one issue that should really concern all of us about the emission and the pollution that it was causing. And what had happened was that the farmers had demanded, and the government unfortunately agreed to remove the ordinance that they had brought for reducing the crop residue burning. And that was one issue. The second issue, which is the water, and India has a very major water crisis. And I felt that there was this issue of water depletion, groundwater depletion in India, which is primarily because of use of groundwater for irrigation for agriculture. And that was the second issue that I felt was not being taken into account in the discussion on the farm laws. And the third was about the food wastage.
Yes.
I rarely read anything about the food wastage, and as the number that I have quoted, and there are a number of studies. ICAR has done a study. There's a huge amount of food wastage and the financial and economic cost in that food wastage. In addition, there is also embedded carbon and embedded water. After all, when we grow food, there is a lot of water that goes into growing food. So the food wastage is also the wastage of water and the wastage of embedded carbon in it.
Okay.
And the fourth issue was on the markets. So those were the four issues I thought should be brought to the discussion and should be taken into consideration while finding a more pragmatic solution to the apprehensions that the farmers had.
Is there an attempt being made, Mr. Gulati, to set a false narrative on a lot of domestic issues? Since you yourself are an environmentalist and energy expert, we will restrict this conversation to the farm laws in India. You've mentioned in your letter, I have that open letter with me, energy, water, agriculture nexus. What do you really mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that this issue is being, you're focusing on that issue, because this is one issue that has been so far so neglected in India. This is an issue on which I've been working for a long time. Let me just explain a little bit about this nexus between agriculture, water, and energy. Agriculture is facing a catastrophic depletion of water, groundwater. There is also the shifting patterns of weather and rainfall due to climate change, and very low long-term agricultural growth, which has been in the range of about 2.5% to 3%. And the farmers are facing the challenge of small and reducing land holdings. As you can see, that 85% of farmers are small and marginal farmers in India.
Okay.
The production risk that they face because of the erratic supply of power for irrigation. The quality of power is not very good, and they don't get adequate power supply when they need it for irrigation of crops. So therefore, that brings in the production risk and the unreliability of irrigation for the farmers. And also, as I have explained elsewhere, that there is an acute dependence of the rural population on agriculture for the livelihood. And I'll elaborate on this a little later, but let me first explain what do we mean by the nexus. As far as the groundwater is concerned, the groundwater in India has reached an alarmingly low level because of unmetered and subsidized electricity supply to agriculture, and also because of the minimum support price and the public procurement of crops which are grown in an area which is inappropriate agroclimatically for growing those crops. For example, Punjab and Haryana should not be growing paddy because it's not appropriate for them. The third thing is that the state governments are burdened with very high cost of subsidized electricity to agriculture.
Let's take these points one by one. Let me first, because you talked about Punjab and Haryana, and these two states were the epicenters of farm protests recently. Now, how do you think these new agricultural laws are actually going to reduce the crop residue burning, which is one of the core issues, isn't it? Very briefly.
Yeah, the laws would not affect the crop residue burning. What I was referring to was the withdrawal of the law, or the ordinance actually, on crop residue burning. And what we need to do is that between the two adversarial positions, one is that you burn it, there'll be huge penalties. That is one position. On the other hand, there is also the demand or the freedom to burn the crop residue. Between these two adversarial positions, we need to find a pragmatic solution. And there are pragmatic solutions available. Technical solutions are available, which the farmers need to be helped with those technical solutions, providing them technical awareness, technical knowledge, access to technology, financing for employing those technologies. And therefore, we need to provide that support to the farmers to reduce the crop residue burning. The second thing that will happen is that as the agricultural markets expand, as the agricultural markets become more diverse and deepen, the farmers will get incentive for growing other crops. If other crops become more profitable, which is what would be possible, then the farmers will be able to shift away from water-intensive crops like paddy. And therefore, this is something which is necessary for providing them an alternative, which is what will be possible as the agricultural markets become more profitable, the agriculture becomes more profitable, and they are able to diversify into more financially profitable crops.
Okay, I'm going to quickly, no, but how are these new laws going to help actually reduce the food wastage also? Basically, the point is that the issues that you have raised, you have elaborated on those issues and their correlation with the farm laws, right? So, when it comes to the food wastage part, because we need to understand, when you have so much of misinformation being spread by certain vested interests on the farm laws, but why are these farm laws important? How is it going to benefit the farmers? And government is categorically very clear about it. And that's the message the government has been trying to send across time and again. So Greta Thunberg and the likes of her need to basically get into the core of these laws, right?
Okay. Where and how does this food wastage occur in India? The FAO's report and also the ICAR's report, they did a very extensive study on it, that the 40% of the food grown in India is wasted. Of that 40%, 2/3 of the wastage occurs post-harvest. So therefore, what is really happening is the wastage is occurring in the you don't have adequate post-harvest storage, transportation, distribution, processing, value addition. So unless we can bring in investment in that whole supply chain, modernize that whole supply chain, the food wastage will continue to happen. So therefore, these laws will create an enabling environment for the private sector investment to come in. There will also be a more regulated market, a more regulated contracting between the farmers and the private sector. And those contracts need to be regulated in a manner that the small and marginal farmers do not have an unequal or the asymmetric negotiation with the private sector. So by these laws, you're creating a enabling environment and creating the regulations so that the private investment can be brought in. And with that private investment, whether that is in the post-harvest storage or whether that is in processing, value addition, whether that is in the cold chains, so therefore new technologies, new new management, and also the new investments will be brought in into the whole supply chain of food, which will help reduce the food wastage.
But Mr. Gulati, you also talked about how these new farm laws are going to infuse a lot of transparency, which could close the loopholes or something that actually exploits your tax-free agricultural income. Because our Prime Minister, Indian Prime Minister, there is a vision that our farmers are no more going to be called farmers in near future, but entrepreneurs. And these new farm laws are a big jump in that direction. Would you agree?
Yes, I mean, agriculture needs to be unshackled. Right now what is happening is that I have written about the problems with the markets, with the APMCs, that those APMCs serve a purpose, serve a very useful purpose. and those need to be modernized. There need to be a lot of changes that need to be brought into the APMCs because a lot of internal organization and the way they function and the way some cartelization takes place there. So all of those things need to happen to improve the functioning of the APMCs and make it more transparent. But you also need to bring in the competition by opening it up to the other players. And when you create alternatives for the farmers that they are able to sell, they are not forced to sell only in APMCs, that they can also sell it to other players, then that will create competition in the market and the markets will become more efficient. But also the new laws will bring in much more transparency in the transactions between the farmer and the private sector. And that is what will help increase more income for the farmers and add more value to their product.
Okay, in your letter, you have not only appealed for the peaceful dialogue between the farmers and the government, and that is something which in any way is happening. There were multiple rounds of engagement at the government level.
That as far as the apprehensions of the farmers are concerned, there needs to be obviously a dialogue. There needs to be more consultation to better understand, for the farmers to explain and for the government to better understand what exactly are their apprehensions, what is the risk that they see, how can those be addressed.
Why do you think, first of all, do you think there is a certain bias when it comes to the global media, certain sections of Western media rather, covering or their reportage on our domestic issues? For example, the way farm laws or these farmers' protests were commented by certain countries.
I have done reform work more in the energy sector around the world. And I can share with you the experience from those. What happens is that when you launch a reform program of this magnitude and of this complexity, which is shaking the old order and trying to bring in a new system,
okay,
where number of stakeholders will be affected. Some will be the beneficiaries, many will be the losers of the status quo and losers of the reform, and some of those losses are maybe legitimate, some of those may not be. So what happens is that a lot of people do not understand it. So you have to provide more information. There may be some biases here and there because they have proclivities of their own ideological positions, but very often, and more often than not, people don't have credible information. So therefore, if you provide that information to different stakeholders and also have, let's say, some kind of a communication with different stakeholders, provide this to the media, then they, at least to the extent that they are poorly informed or misinformed, that aspect of that communication or that bias can be removed. If there are some small proportion of people who have these inherent biases, that is something which you cannot help.
One doesn't mind the opposition.
The media.
Mr. Gulati, we're the world's largest democracy. We don't mind opposition. Opposition is fine. One may have difference of opinion also. And government has always kept that arm of dialogue and engaging with the farmer community open. And I'm sure you know about it. So going back to your open letter to Greta Thunberg, what do you think has been the underlying message, the tone and the tenor through this letter, because you've comprehensively given rebuttals on various fronts, to all those who have criticized these farm laws to no end, trying to make it a bigger issue internationally?
I would say that there are many of these issues, some of the issues that I have pointed out in my letter. There are many very complex issues involved in this. And therefore, anyone who wants to comment on that, and my suggestion to them is that they should familiarize themselves with, one, what are the key issues, what are the complexities in this issue, who are all the stakeholders, what are their concerns, and why is there this difference of disagreements? I mean, there would be. You start any of these reform programs, there will be disagreements and differences in their viewpoints and different approaches people would want to try. That's natural process. So therefore, all that I'm saying, all that I'm trying to do through this letter is please inform yourself, understand the complexities, understand the nuances, and take a more nuanced approach, because there are never any black and white solutions to problems of this complex nature.
And having said that, what are your thoughts on the overall viewpoint if you talk about the farm laws that are in question here?
I would hesitate to comment on the nitty-gritty of the farm laws, but all that I would say is that that we need to be conscious of the fact that the rural incomes are very low, and I have said that elsewhere. And let me just take a minute to explain this. 60 to 65% of the India's population lives in the rural areas, and therefore willy-nilly depends on agriculture directly or indirectly.
Okay.
And agriculture, which contributes only 15% to the GDP, is growing at 2.5 to 3%, while 35% of the population benefits from 85% of the economy, which is manufacturing and services, which is growing at 7 to 8%. Pre-pandemic, the differential between the urban and the rural incomes was 12 times, which means the urban incomes were 12 times the rural incomes. And if this structure of the economy and these sectoral growth rates continue, then by 2030, the differential will be 18 times. By 2040, the differential urban incomes will be 24 times that of the rural incomes. Today, the agricultural household's monthly income, average monthly income, is only 9,000 rupees. So this level of inequality and growing inequality, this is something which can be socially, economically, and politically very destabilizing. This, I have said before, is a ticking time bomb. And therefore, this is something which must be addressed. We have to be conscious of that issue of growing inequality and the dependence of 60% of the population, rural population, on the agriculture as a livelihood. So we need to diversify the livelihoods. We need to get them income generating activities which are off farm and non-farm. And also we need to diversify agriculture. So both diversify the rural livelihoods as well as diversify agriculture. And I have written 2 reports on this. One is called Direct Delivery of Power Subsidy to Agriculture in India. And the second report is Grow Solar, Save Water, Double the Farmer Income. And in that I have shown that through this Grow Solar report, it is possible to double the farmer income, and we need to pay attention to that.
Okay. One final question to you, Mr. Gulati. After writing this open letter to Greta Thunberg, you've actually elaborated on not only the farm laws, but like I started by saying that the issues that matter the most. We are an agricultural country, the reforms that we are talking about. What would be your final word, your final message to all that unnecessary criticism that is coming from certain national and international quarters? Do you think most of it is based on misplaced information? Most of it is based on misplaced information, half-baked truths. What do you have to say to them?
Quite a lot of it is because of inadequate information available, and also I would say misinformation, as well as I would say the stakeholders in this discussion need to have better information, need to inform themselves better, take into account the larger picture, and look at all these issues that we are pointing out, and therefore have a more informed, better informed discussion and a dialogue. And that better informed dialogue will lead to a better solution, which will be a win-win solution for all the parties. And what will happen is that when you bring different stakeholders with different and conflicting interests, the solution may be suboptimal for each of the stakeholders, but it will be optimal for the collective, for the country. So therefore, don't look at the suboptimal solution from your individual stakeholder perspective. Look at the greater good of the greater number of people. And if you discuss these things with an open mind, with more evidence, with more facts, and if you are better informed, you'll be able to come to a better solution which will be good for everyone.
So this lack of knowledge, lack of adequate knowledge for those who are not only opinionated but who are expressing their opinions on public platforms, some of it could be of provocative nature. Don't you think this is setting a very dangerous precedent also? What I'm trying to ask is the way we saw flare up on the social media, what we saw on 26th of January, all on the basis of misplaced information, Mr. Gulati.
Well, I'm smiling because of the experience that I want to bring into this conversation. When I was involved with the power sector reform in UP, you know what had happened? There were 69 labor unions. They all went on strike. The entire UP power sector was shut down. The other power sector employees went on strike. The postal workers union went on strike. The port workers union went on strike. The banking industry unions, they were threatening to go on strike. This is what had happened in that reform. And the territorial army and the police were called to run the power station. The territorial army and the other engineers were called in to continue to provide minimum level of services and power supply. So this is what happens, that these reforms can be very difficult, and therefore what is happening in the farm agitation is nothing compared to what had happened as a part of the reforms in 93, 94, 95 during that period. So therefore, yes, these are very complex reforms. People come with very different expectations, with different interests. And therefore, one has to patiently deal with it and try to find a common space.
Yes, and are we dealing with it well?
Well, I would hesitate to say anything on how it is being dealt with, but as far as I have seen from a distance, I think it's been handled fairly well so far, and I hope that all the parties will come to the table and lay out their apprehensions with an open mind and have an open discussion.
Thank you very much. On that note, Mr. Mohinder Gulati, former COO, for joining us. Sustainable Development for All, a multilateral agency launched by United Nations. Somebody who has given a point-by-point rebuttal to Greta Thunberg and many like her, who have, as per Mr. Gulati, also, opinionated on India's domestic issues, particularly farm laws, based on misplaced information and lack of knowledge, and by doing so, wading into our political and social issues is something which certainly will not be acceptable. Mr. Gulati, many thanks for joining us all the way from Melbourne on DD Dialogue.
आपका केवाईसी अपडेट करना है, नहीं तो अकाउंट और एटीएम कार्ड ब्लॉक हो जाएगा।
सावधान सावधान।
2.5 करोड़ का इनाम मुझे।
देखिए, अनजाने कॉल्स, फर्जी ईमेल्स, लिंक्स और जाली ऐप से अपना पिन, ओटीपी, पासवर्ड कभी भी किसी के साथ शेयर न करें। आप रहेंगे सावधान तो नहीं होगा नुकसान। आरबीआई कहता है, जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
We're going to talk exclusively to Mr. Mohinder Gulati, joining us all the way from Melbourne. He has actually given a blow-by-blow rebuttal to Greta Thunberg and many like her.
All that I'm trying to do through this letter is, please inform yourself, understand the complexities, understand the nuances, and take a more nuanced approach. Agriculture needs to be unshackled. These laws will create an enabling environment for the private sector investment to come in. There will also be a more regulated market, a more regulated contracting between the farmers and the private sector.